The Bronx NAACP, right? Okay. So we're all here collectively to give you this forum, and unfortunately, County Executive George Latimer fell ill at the last minute. And he was going to try to get on virtually, but he's not up to it. So unfortunately, we will not be able to hear from George Latimer today. And so that changes everything, but we're still going to go through with this. It's still going to be great. We have the other candidate, and he is going to be able to answer all our questions. So thank you once again for coming out. I'd like to remind everyone that we are a nonpartisan organization. We do not endorse candidates at all under any circumstances. What we do is we try to educate and inform the community so that they can make informed decisions when they go to the voting booth. Okay? That's what we do. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator. We have two. No, at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Carla. to Aisha. I'm sorry, Aisha. Everything has changed. I'm sorry. I'm going to turn it over to Aisha, and Aisha will take it from here.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Aisha Cook. I'm the first vice president of the New Rochelle branch of the NAACP, and I will be reading the rules for tonight, though they don't necessarily apply when there's only one candidate. But bear with me. Well, where is the candidate? Well, my first thing is to welcome the candidate, but I'll go back to that on the tail end. The ground rules for this forum are as follows. Okay, well, we know the order of the speaking. So the candidate will have up to 3 minutes for an opening statement. At the conclusion of the opening statement, the moderator will ask one question submitted by the sponsoring organization. And then the order of responses will be just the candidate. Throughout the forum, the moderators will rotate the order of candidate responses. The moderators will Okay, throughout the forum, the moderators will rotate who asks the question, let's put it that way, and the candidate will have 90 seconds to answer each question. For all statements by the candidate, the timekeeper will hold up a sign to indicate 30 seconds remaining and a stop sign when time is up.
Excuse me, since we only have one candidate, why are we having this time interval? Why can't they do 5 or 6 minutes at the onset and then not just say,
Well, the preparation was for a 3-minute opening, so we don't want to change that. No, I know, but I'm saying he's prepared an opening. All right, we don't have to do the back and forth, but at the conclusion of this forum, the candidate will give a 2-minute closing statement. And audience, please be respectful when our speaker is speaking, remain silent, and also silence your cell phones. No campaign literature is to be distributed in this building. You are, however, free to distribute materials after the forum outside of this venue. The NAACP disclaimer. Consistent with the NAACP National Statement on Endorsement, we want to clarify that the NAACP is a nonpartisan organization and does not endorse candidates for political office at any level. Our moderators for the evening are Keisha Skipper, First Vice President of the Yonkers Branch NAACP, and Christalia King, Criminal Justice Chair of the White Plains Greenberg Branch NAACP. And our timekeeper this evening is Michelle Shivers from New Rochelle Branch NAACP. Thank you.
You want me to read this? Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. We are using this way. Thank you all for your patience and for being here on this evening. We truly appreciate it.
The regional director of the NAACP says to proceed.
Without mentioning the chair policy? Your policy.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jamal Bowman. New York Congressman for 16th District.
Thank you and good evening. We have established the order since there's only one candidate. We forfeited the coin toss. However, I will refer to you this evening by Mr. Bowman unless otherwise instructed.
Okay.
As stated, the purpose of this forum is informational and educational. We will begin with allowing you 3 minutes for a candidate's opening statement, which should include any and all detailed reasons why voters should elect you to represent them in the 16th Congressional District. You may begin.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I am Congressman Dr. Jamal Bowman, just messing with you. Congressman Dr. Jamal Bowman representing New York's 16th District, which covers the Northeast Bronx and Southern Westchester County. I've had the privilege of being in this position since January 3rd, 2021. I'm a lifelong educator. I worked in education for 20 years before deciding to run for Congress in 2019. Started my career as an elementary school teacher in the South Bronx before becoming a high school dean of students and guidance counselor before having the privilege to open up my own school and serve as a middle school principal for 10.5 years in the Northeast Bronx, right on the other side of the highway from Co-op City. And it was that experience in education, plus my personal experience as a young man growing up during the crack cocaine epidemic to a single mom, getting through that, being the first in my family to go to and graduate from college, living through that, plus my professional experiences as an educator that led to me running for office in the first place. The bottom line is this: our American democracy is not working for all people. And we need to do everything in our power to make sure we are governing from the perspective of humanity and governing from the perspective of equity. And when you look in our district, if you are black and brown in our district, you have less access, less opportunity, and less resources. And that is completely unacceptable. These are policy decisions, and these are budget decisions. So I ran for office and won a historic victory in 2020. And since I've gotten in, I've tried to govern from the perspective of equity. We brought well over $1 billion back to the district, looking to invest in reducing gun violence, affordable housing, education, climate justice, healthcare with a particular focus on mental health, and wealth building and creating access and opportunity for the American dream. When I opened my own school, the goal was to unlock the unlimited potential of my kids. And now, as your congressman, I aim to unlock the unlimited potential of the district. So I hope to have your vote, hope to have your support on or before June 25th.
Thank you, Dr. Bowman. Our first series of questions will be regarding health care and health-related matters. Affordability in healthcare is of great concern, especially for diseases like diabetes, hypertension, obesity, sickle cell anemia, and other diseases that plague Black and brown communities and other communities of color. What do you propose to make healthcare more affordable, and your response should include your position on free public healthcare?
So I support Medicare for all. Medicare for all is a universal healthcare system, single-payer system, free at the point of delivery. We are taxpayers in the United States of America. It is the wealthiest nation on earth. Healthcare is a human right, and we should all have free healthcare. I'm an original co-sponsor of the Medicare for All bill in the House, along with Pramila Jayapal. Bernie Sanders is leading the bill in the Senate, and it's going to be a long fight because we got big pharmaceutical companies and healthcare insurance companies who want to keep healthcare as part of the capitalist system and not provide it for people. We are pushing back against that, so we need as much support as possible to make Medicare for all a reality. In the meantime, we've brought back millions of dollars to invest in healthcare here. I mentioned in passing, but I want to be more specific. We've given $1 million to St. John's Hospital in Yonkers to help them expand their emergency unit. We've given over $2 million to the Bronx Health Community Network so they could build a community health center on White Plains Road in the Northeast Bronx. We've given $100,000 to the, $100,000 to the Mount Vernon Neighborhood Health Center, now the Westchester Neighborhood Health Center, so they could implement a visiting nurse service to seniors who were isolated during COVID, and many, many other programs. So we're doing what we can in the meantime to make healthcare affordable, but we need Medicare for all.
Thank you, Dr. Bowman. I'm not sure if you were present for the rules part, but you will have 90 seconds to answer each of the questions. And if that time lapses, you can certainly pick it back up with the next question.
I got you.
Our second question, our country has significant health disparities, especially regarding Black maternal health. What policies or legislations would you be willing to champion to combat this health crisis?
So Lauren Underwood is an incredible leader in this space in Congress already. When I was running, I read her bill, the Momnibus bill, which focuses particularly on the issue of maternal health and maternal morbidity. I'm an original co-sponsor of this bill in Congress right now, and it's something we're trying to pass very aggressively. But locally, we've worked with Nubia Martin and Birth from the Earth and other organizations that support midwives and birthing mothers in ensuring that Black women don't continue to die disproportionately due to the racism within our healthcare system. And I want to be very, very clear. The reason why this continues to happen is because of racism within our healthcare system and the racist practices that are implemented through bias from doctors, from OBGYNs and the like. We need more birth workers, we need more midwives, we need more investment, and we need re-education of everyone in the healthcare system so we can stop this tragedy from happening. Not only is America one of the worst around the world, if not the worst in maternal mortality, New York State has abysmal numbers in these areas. And again, our money to St. John's and our money to other areas addresses this on a small level, but we need big federal legislation to respond to it.
Thank you. You will now have 2 minutes to answer each question.
I'll try to be concise.
What is your position on abortion rights and women's right to choose? Your response should also include your position on funding for all Title X providers, including Planned Parenthood.
So I'm proud to be the only candidate in this race that's endorsed by Planned Parenthood. So I think that tells you a little bit about our position. It is not for us to tell a woman what the hell she could do with her body. Period. It's not for us to say. Women can do whatever they want with their body, and we are supposed to support that with a universal health care system. We have to codify Roe v. Wade in Congress. We are a long way away from doing that since the Supreme Court gutted Roe v. Wade. I don't want to get too much into democracy reform with this question, but it is imperative for everyone to be full participants in our democracy, not just in this district, but around the country, not just for congressional seats, but for Senate seats. Because if we don't get more seats in the Senate, it's going to be very difficult to codify Roe v. Wade. So part of my work is not just as a member of Congress putting forward legislation and bringing back resources, it's also doing grassroots organizing across the country with young people, people of color in particular, so that they can build political power in their communities so that we can get the right people in the Senate and codify Roe v. Wade. So that has to happen. We don't tell women what to do with their bodies. They can do whatever the hell they want, and that's my position on that.
Thank you. Our last question in this category. There is a national mental health crisis with many cases closely related to substance abuse among adults. And statistics also show that suicide is the #2 leading cause of death among youth 10 to 14 years of age, indicating a mental health crisis among not only adults, but our youth and young adults, especially in minority communities. If elected, how would you address these concerns, and would you be willing to champion an amendment to H.R. 7666, the Restoring Hope for Mental Health and Well-Being Act, with a focus on these mental health concerns?
You mean if re-elected? I've been elected twice already.
Yes, sorry, I was expecting that. If re-elected.
All good. But I have been elected twice, just so y'all know. So the year before I ran for office, 34 kids died within the K-12 school system in the Bronx. 17 died via suicide. A young girl, 14 years old, was bullied in school in Co-op City. After school, she went to the top of a building and jumped off. That girl's sister, the following year, transferred into my school because she heard that my school was a safe haven for children that struggle with mental health. And some of you have known me in here since I was Principal Bowman, and you know that to be true. We were dealing very personally with the mental health crisis at that time. We saw a spike, an increase in children who were engaged in self-harm, and a spike in suicidal ideation. As a matter of fact, one day a student in my school was cutting herself in the bathroom, and she went too deep, and we had to call an ambulance for her. So this is really personal for me. We introduced a bill called the Access for All Act that seeks to increase mental health providers across the country. It invests in minority-serving institutions, and Hispanic-serving institutions, and HBCUs, because there's a lot of mental health providers of color providing services to our kids. And I know many of you in the audience personally, and many people in this audience have dealt with this issue personally with their children, and I've supported them and worked with them on that. So yes to the bill in terms of the amendment. We've also introduced our own legislation, and again, we've brought back money to our district through the Youth Heal program that's now going to be part of Westchester Youth Shelter that focuses on mental health and substance abuse.
Thank you, Dr. Bowman. Our next series of questions involve environmental and climate justice. Over 500,000 people of color in CD-16 suffer from lung diseases and disorders such as asthma and COPD directly related to poor air quality. If re-elected, how do you intend to help address these issues, and would you champion an amendment to the Clean Air Act, which has not been amended since 1992, to help improve the air quality specifically for these most vulnerable communities?
Absolutely yes. And we have introduced climate legislation since we've gotten into Congress. We're having an entirely new conversation in Congress about climate justice rooted in environmental racism, because oftentimes, or in the past, we've talked about climate justice without talking about how it disproportionately impacts communities of color. If you live in the Bronx, you are 5 times more likely to die of asthma than anywhere else in the country. And in our county, Mount Vernon, Yonkers, because of the water treatment facility in Yonkers that hasn't been treated and has an expiring permit there. Because of communities like that, we disproportionately suffer from upper respiratory illness, as it was mentioned. What people don't often talk about is because of those upper respiratory illnesses, we were more vulnerable to COVID, and that's why we died at higher rates from COVID. So I am the lead author of something called the Green New Deal for Public Schools. The Green New Deal for Public Schools seeks to invest $1 trillion in rebuilding the public school infrastructure over the next 10 years so that our public schools can be the leaders in climate justice with their building facilities. You like that?
I love it.
Everybody should like that. We need to stop using fossil fuels right now. And we have the technology to do so. We just need to invest in the Green New Deal, rebuild our infrastructure, create millions of jobs across the country, and get away from fossil fuels disproportionately killing us, but warming the planet, leading to more consistent, more severe storms, destroying infrastructure and killing people. We need a Green New Deal. Green New Deal for cities, Green New Deal for public schools, Green New Deal for housing. We need to invest in a Green New Deal.
Excuse me, if you could just pull the mic a little away from you. It's hard to hear on Zoom. Thank you so much.
Sorry, Zoom.
Thank you, Dr. Bowman, and that was a perfect segue to our last question in this environmental and climate justice, which is, if re-elected, what policies and or legislation would you initiate to ensure that should a national climate emergency occur, residents in CD-16 would be prepared with shelter and supplies?
So we want the president to declare a climate emergency right now. He hasn't done it as of yet. If the president were to do this, he would free up resources that will help us to rebuild our climate infrastructure right now. So we have to take action now so we don't get to a point where we need to live in some alternative shelter. But Hurricane Ida, I think, is informative as to what happened, something that happened recently that literally led to people losing their homes, small churches being destroyed, and people living in alternative settings. And what I've been frustrated by is, we've worked with FEMA to bring in resources to rebuild homes, but federal legislation is not in alignment with the climate emergency that we are currently living. And that's why we need Green New Deal. I was very frustrated when my opponent mentioned that there's not going to be a new climate legislation with his name on it. It's not about having your name on it. It's about responding to the urgency of the moment. And right now that requires federal legislation and it requires dollars. We don't have enough dollars going to this area to respond to the climate emergency that you're describing. And that's exactly what we need.
Oh, I was waiting for the applause.
No applause. We keep it moving.
Thank you, Dr. Bowman. Our co-moderator, Christopher King, will cover the next series of questions.
Thank you. Love the afro.
Oh, thank you. Regarding criminal justice, our criminal justice system has long been scrutinized for its disproportionate impact on communities of color, resulting in significant social and economic consequences. As a candidate for CD-16, it is essential to address whether you acknowledge this disparity and what measures you would support to rectify it. The question is, do you believe that our criminal justice system disproportionately impacts communities of color? If so, what policies or legislation would you champion or propose to promote equity within our federal criminal justice system?
Yes, I do think it is. It disproportionately impacts communities of color. We need to amend the 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution, which states that it is legal to have slavery in our prison system. Because ever since then, mass incarceration has been taking place, and it has accelerated over the last several decades, beginning with Nixon. They took jobs away from our communities, sent them overseas with globalization. They didn't replace those jobs. They brought in police, and those police have been engaging in mass incarceration of our people since then, okay? So we need police reform to make sure we are supporting police who are doing the right thing, holding those accountable who are not doing the right thing. We need prison reform because we still have people in jail for long periods of time for small amounts of marijuana and very minor crimes, and that's a major problem. We need reform in the prison as well in terms of rehabilitation. If someone does a crime and they're held accountable, what can we do to make sure they don't come out and they're not going to commit another crime to go back in through recidivism? We need to provide more housing for reentry, more health care for reentry, more workforce development for reentry as well. But outside of the justice system, can we deal with the issue of concentrated poverty and the redlining of our communities? If our communities continue to be redlined and we don't address the issue of concentrated poverty, which leads to toxic stress and chronic trauma, people are going to continue to cause harm in their communities and get arrested for it. Lastly, investing in education, investing in mental health, investing in substance abuse, and finally having a real conversation about reparations for Black people will help us to heal the historical harms that will stop us from being locked up in the first place.
Thank you. The tragic death of George Floyd and the subsequent introduction of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act have highlighted the urgent need for reform in policing practices, particularly concerning their impact on communities of color and other marginalized groups. Addressing police brutality and ensuring equitable treatment by law enforcement is a critical issue for many people in District 16. The question is, what steps would you take to remedy the problem of police brutality against communities of color and marginalized communities, particularly in light of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act?
We need to end qualified immunity. So qualified immunity does not allow those who are harmed by police in situations where police may have violated someone's civil rights for that officer to be sued or held accountable for that. So as a result, our taxpayer money goes towards protecting officers who may have done the wrong thing. If we end qualified immunity, the officers themselves can be held accountable, and it's not coming from taxpayer money. We also need to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. So, again, and it's important for me to say this because there's been some conversation about whatever. I'm not even going to get into that. But in order to pass a piece of legislation in Congress, you need a simple majority in the House and a super majority in the Senate. Meaning, not 51-49, 60-40. So if you have senators from states that support the Confederacy, for example, you're going to have racist senators who represent less people with as much power as those who represent more people. It's called minority rule. And because of that and the filibuster, we can't pass transformational pieces of legislation in Congress because of the Senate. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act was this close to being passed. I know, I talk to Cory Booker all the time. He was working on this. He even got the Fraternal Order of Police on board to support this bill. But because of sheriffs in South Carolina, they told Tim Scott, you better not think of supporting that bill. And Tim Scott listened, he got in line, and that bill was not supported and did not move forward. And this goes back to the electoral stuff, the grassroots organizing stuff, but it's important for us to know how Congress works, because a lot of people saying things out there about my record, and they don't even know how Congress works.
These are both.
Gun violence continues to be a national crisis. How do you propose to strengthen federal gun laws to protect residents of CD-16?
We need to ban assault rifles. We need expanded background checks. We need to close gun show loopholes. We need to respond to the federal crime of gun trafficking that begins in states like Georgia and Texas and Virginia and South Carolina. Officers know. I met with the ATF and NYPD in their facilities downtown. They know when someone buys 10 weapons in the Georgia gun place, gun shop. They know that. And they know, based on history, that that person is probably going to distribute those weapons so that they can be trafficked to places like New York. Over 70% of the gun violence that happens in New York is with guns that don't come from New York. So we have to deal with what they call an iron pipeline. When we know that people are buying guns out of state and they're part of you know what else we know? This is crazy. We know the gun shops that sell most of the guns that are trafficked. We know this, but we're not responding to it. We're literally looking the other way. And so that needs to be dealt with, that needs to be stopped. What we have done is we wrote a letter to President Biden in 2021, I believe, might be 2022, 21, calling on the president to take 6 executive actions on guns, and one of them was to ban ghost guns. And we did that after a young man, Julian, was killed in New Rochelle by a ghost gun, by another teenager. We wrote the president that letter, and the president banned ghost guns. So y'all should clap for that. And so we've done that. We screaming in the House floor to Thomas Massey and others to force them to do something on gun violence. The president also, for the first time in history, opened the Gun Violence Prevention Office in the White House. First time in history. That's due to our advocacy. So right now it's a lot of advocacy and we also worked, I forgot about this, to pass the Safer Communities Act, which happened after the Uvalde shooting. So some legislation's been passed, a lot more needs to be done.
Thank you. Regarding housing, District 16, like many other areas, are facing a housing crisis that affects moderate and low-income families. The availability of affordable housing is a critical concern that requires immediate and effective policy solutions. The question is, what policies do you support to increase the availability of housing in the community that is within reach of moderate and low-income families?
So there's a bill called the Housing for All Act. It seeks to invest $1 trillion over the next 10 years to make sure every single person in our country has a home. It is sponsored by Ilhan Omar. I'm an original co-sponsor. Housing is a human right. Everyone should have access to an affordable, clean, dignified, respectful home. You work 40 hours a week, nearly 40 hours a week, you should be able to have a home. We are about to introduce a bill, a federal bill, that ensures no one pays more than 20% of their salary towards housing. Right now, the majority of people in New York 16 are either rent burdened or severely rent burdened, particularly black and brown people. And again, I don't want to talk about him because he's not here, but my opponent in the position of county executive has had the executive authority and budget to be a champion and leader on affordable housing in Westchester because we have needed it since Astorino. He did a report, didn't do much else. And this is the problem with many in positions like mine, career politicians. They do reports, they form committees, they form councils, they write white papers, but where's the budget, and where's the leadership, and where's the action? Build more affordable housing. And you have to do it in areas that some consider to be NIMBY. We can build affordable housing in Scarsdale. We could build affordable housing in Rye. It don't only have to be in Mount Vernon and Yonkers. It could be everywhere. We just gave West Half $2.5 million to build a completely sustainable, affordable housing unit in Yonkers. $2.5 million. Built this amazing place. 45% of the people living there are formerly homeless.
All right.
You know what West Hab has found? Formerly homeless people, guess what? They work full-time all the time and just can't afford housing. And when they get their housing, they're not causing trouble. They just want to live and be at peace. So we need some of the NIMBY communities around here to accept more affordable housing.
Thank you. Additionally, addressing homelessness in our community, which you just touched on, is essential for creating a stable and supportive environment for all residents. How do you plan to address homelessness? But I guess you kind of touched on it. I don't know if you want to explain.
Build more housing. See, the problem is, So I get criticized sometimes because I'm critical of capitalism. And I'm not critical of capitalism from the sake of if someone has an idea to start a business, they should get support to start that business. But we have a system where large corporations do not pay their fair share in taxes. The wealthy elite do not pay their fair share in taxes. And Wall Street now is controlling the housing market. So they're keeping housing stock low so that the cost of housing is higher. They don't care if people are homeless. They feel they're going to end up in jail in the first place, going back to your other point, right? We need to hold them accountable to contribute more to our democracy, pay their fair share, so that we could build more housing. If we build more housing, we could deal with the issue of homelessness. Not just mention what West Hab is doing. So it can be done. And this is supportive housing, which is a key point, because there was a study a couple of years ago where I believe 47 or 57% of homeless people in California had some form of traumatic brain injury. So they didn't just need additional housing, they needed a social worker on site and healthcare services on site. That's the kind of housing we need, and that's the kind of community we need. Replicate something like Co-op City with additional healthcare. And we tried to do that with a bill that we introduced called the Affordable Co-op Act, which replicates Co-op City, which is forever affordable in different communities all across the country. That's what we need. Build more housing, keep it forever affordable.
Regarding immigration, immigration reform is a pivotal issue, carrying significant implications for undocumented immigrants seeking a path to citizenship. The question is, what is your stance on creating a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants?
So we have to create a path to citizenship. And I want to make a clarifying statement. Undocumented does not mean illegal, right? So it is legal to seek asylum in our country. The majority of people coming here are seeking asylum, which means they are running away from horrible conditions. The majority. I know this for a fact. I went to the border to meet with Border Police, CBP, and I asked them point blank, how many of the people you stop, or what percentage of the people you stop are actually committing a crime? They said 95% or more are not committing any crime. Are not. That's one point. Another point, Republicans like to talk about, immigrants are bringing in fentanyl. That's not true. The majority of fentanyl that's brought into this country is brought in by American citizens. So it's really important for us to know that. This is maybe even a better point. I had the privilege of visiting Honduras and Guatemala during my first term, because I wanted to get an understanding of the root causes of mass migration. A lot of us think it's Mexico. It's not Mexico. It's Central and South America. When I visited with the indigenous people there, and I want to use that word again, indigenous people. The Garifuna in Honduras are African indigenous people. When I met with them, they were telling me and taught me about the multinational corporations in the West who are coming there to drill on their land for natural resources and destroying their ecosystems. As a result of that, they have no job opportunities, no public school system, nothing. And when they push back, their military and police, who are funded by America, disappear their families. So they are forced to walk across continents to get to a place that gives them a better opportunity. The place that was a part of destroying their ecosystems in the first place. Those of you of a certain age, y'all remember the Iran-Contra scandal. We sent money to certain countries, they sent weapons to Nicaragua, they sent cocaine here, and started the crack cocaine epidemic. This is the same area. And the Sandinistas were fighting back at war with them. This is the same area that's leading to mass migration. And then the last thing I'll say is this. Climate change is impacting migration all over the world. It's not just here. And so because of climate change, people can no longer farm arable land in certain countries. So they have to move. So mass migration is happening all over the world. They come into Western nations. And Western nations should give back, since through slavery and genocide and colonization, we've taken all the natural resources from the global south anyway. So we should give reparations as part of that. Sorry.
I'll turn it back over to my co-moderator.
Next series of questions will be involving taxation, funding, and finances. And so, a perfect segue. Our first question is, do you support reparations for Black Americans with slavery?
Yes, next question.
If so, how will you use your congressional office to assist in obtaining reparations for those individuals?
You know, I'm a co-sponsor of a reparations resolution along with Cori Bush to spend $14 trillion to provide reparations to African Americans. I was really surprised that I was criticized for this, like by my opponent and others. Like, my opponent doesn't think it's a realistic thing to even talk about reparations right now for Black people. What's frustrating about that is there are other groups who have gotten reparations in this country and around the world. Why can't we have reparations? When you look at all outcomes, life expectancy, health outcomes, education outcomes, economic outcomes, Black people remain at the bottom. When you look at studies of epigenetics, we have learned that trauma lives in the body for generations. That, along with fried chicken, we need to change our diets. That, along with fried chicken, will clog your arteries and you are more likely to get cancer or have heart disease than every other person, other people. Reparations is about responding to and repairing that harm. At the very least, it's been 30, 40 years since my brother, I'm forgetting his name right now, he passed away, don't kill me, ancestors. We introduced a reparations bill for 40 straight years. It hasn't even gotten a vote on the House floor. So how are we, thank you, Congress, John Congress, thank you. See, this is why you gotta be with your people. How are Black people supposed to care about, trust, have faith in our political system when people in that system are saying, y'all don't need reparations and we don't even need to have a conversation? That's what's happening right now with my opponent and his supporters. And so, yes, I support reparations.
Thank you, Dr. Bowman. If re-elected, what additional federal funds will you bring to CD-16, and how will you ensure that the funding allocated is used for the purposes in which they are intended? A great failure in urban communities especially is the lack of oversight and accountability.
This is a great question. And this was my biggest learning curve when I got in. So I thought, you write good legislation, you pass it, it becomes law, you appropriate money, and that money goes where it's supposed to go. It doesn't. It goes to states, it goes to counties, wink, wink, and it goes to local municipalities. And if we aren't advocating from the ground up, they're going to use the money however they want. So we, and me in my position, have to provide stringent oversight to ensure that that money goes where it needs to go. This is where collaboration comes into play, and this is where the stick side of carrot and stick comes into play. Because I am tired of walking through Yonkers and Mount Vernon and Greenburgh and New Rochelle and the Bronx, and it looks like no one has invested $1 in certain areas in 100 years. That's why one of the first things I did when I got to Congress, first of all, as a freshman, I was chair of the Energy Subcommittee on the Science, Space, and Tech Committee, the only freshman to chair a committee.
That's right.
I also ran and was elected vice chair of the Education and Labor Committee. The first bill we worked on was the American Rescue Plan. I fought like hell to make sure that bill was rooted in equity, so that underfunded communities and redline communities would get more money than wealthier communities. And that's exactly what happened with the American Rescue Plan. But still, I have to provide oversight and hold accountable local elected officials who aren't doing right by the black and brown people in our district in particular, because they haven't been doing right for years.
Thank you, Dr. Bowman. Our final question under taxation, funding, and finances. I'm sorry, two more questions. The first is, what is your position regarding securing future funding for Social Security benefits?
So yeah, this was a major fight that I was a part of as soon as I got in, increasing SSI benefits. The SSI program is 100 years old, and it hasn't been updated in many, many years. So if you receive SSI, you're supposed to be able to pay your rent bills with that SSI, but you can't because housing's too damn affordable. And if you get a gift from someone, they take your SSI. Or if you get married, they take your SSI. This is crazy. And so we need to completely revise SSI so that it's fully funded at a higher level, so that people aren't penalized when they get gifts or they're married or what have you. So absolutely, we are 1,000% committed to that, despite what lies are being told.
Thank you, Dr. Bowman. And finally, and I know you touched on this earlier, we want to give you an opportunity to elaborate. What measures do you believe must be taken to ensure that the wealthy pay their fair share in federal taxes?
Again, I don't want to, he's not here to defend himself, but I couldn't believe when I heard that my opponent wants to keep Trump's tax cuts. When Donald Trump was president, he provided trillions with a T in tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. My opponent is not in favor of rolling back those cuts other than the SALT tax, which I also support. We should repeal and replace SALT so that we can write off state and local taxes and get money back. Absolutely support that. But my opponent said, President Biden wants to raise taxes on the wealthy. The president does, President Biden. My opponent doesn't support President Biden. You can look it up in the New York Times. It says this guy would be a thorn in President Biden's side if he were to be elected because the president wants to raise taxes and he doesn't. We reward the wealthy in our country with these tax cuts, and their job is to create jobs. They don't create jobs, and they don't pay a living wage. You know what they do? They buy their own stock to increase the profit and wealth in their own companies. We have two bills. You're gonna like this one. The Babies Over Billionaires Act. We want to tax unrealized capital gains. If you could borrow against it, it should be taxed. We want to tax unrealized capital gains at 40%, which the president wants. That will raise $1 trillion over 10 years and will allow us to provide universal child care forever in America. We have another bill called the Ending Corporate Greed Act. You know why? Because inflation is not caused by government spending alone. It's caused by price gouging from corporations. The prices went up, they didn't come all the way back down. We need to look at the books of corporations and get an understanding of what the hell's going on in your corporation where things need to cost this much. That's called the Ending Corporate Greed Act. And we could have had another bill raising tax. We just gave $600 billion tax cuts to corporations again this year. We could have had another bill raising taxes on corporations, but Democrat Senator Joe Manchin in the Senate stopped it. Now, my opponent doesn't support President Biden's tax cuts. Joe Manchin doesn't support President Biden's tax cuts. Do we need another Joe Manchin in Congress? No, we do not.
Thank you again, Dr. Bowman. Our co-moderator, Cristalia King, will cover the final series of questions. And thank you again for being here.
No problem. Good to be with you. Nice dress. And flower. Yeah.
Regarding the voting rights, the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act of 2021, H.R. 4, passed in the House of Representatives and aims to restore and strengthen parts of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The question is, will you sponsor the reintroduction of this bill in the next session of Congress?
Yes. That's very easy. A little bit. So, we have 9 members in the Supreme Court. The former president chose 3 of them. He was able to choose 3 of them. One, because I think 1 or 2 passed away while he was president, but also because Mitch McConnell blocked President Obama when he wanted to choose a Supreme Court justice. It's really important for us to understand how we got here. This Supreme Court is completely conservative. They have cut Roe v. Wade, they've cut voting rights, and they've taken away affirmative action. And they're trying to weaken gun laws. This is why we need democracy reform, which includes ethics reform of the Supreme Court, because they also taken bribes pretty much from Republican billionaires. As a matter of fact, one of the donors that donates to my opponent also donates to Alito in the Supreme Court. This is what we be saying. Republicans are trying to buy this seat. Anyway, we need ethics reform in the Supreme Court to hold them accountable. We need term limits in the Supreme Court because lifetime appointments are too long. We also need to expand the Supreme Court. Reverend Coleman, it has been 9 members since 1860 something. There were 30 million people in America. There are 300 million people now. They don't even have the bandwidth and capacity to listen to all of the cases. We need Supreme Court reform. We need filibuster reform. We need electoral college reform. We need democracy reform. And when you have people like me in office, working class, former educator, came from the bottom, got mad student, all that, regular person. When you have people like me in office, working and governing with working class people, that's how you have the reforms we need. Not a career politician taking big money from MAGA racist Republicans. No.
Thank you so much for that answer. Regarding education and employment, public education is crucial to the development of our community's children, yet schools in Black and brown communities often face significant underfunding. What policies, if any, will you support to improve the quality of education in our public schools and address the underfunding?
This is the best question ever.
Oh.
This is awesome. So, where do I start, Rosa? Where do I... So I mentioned earlier Green New Deal for public schools, which is about rebuilding the public school physical infrastructure. We need to fully invest in our public schools, meaning if you live in a wealthy community, you receive more funding for education than if you live in a poor community. That is racist. And so we need to fully fund public schools in historically marginalized and redlined communities. That's number one, but it's not just funding. We need to reimagine and redesign our schools as learning centers for a 21st century economy. There hasn't been a change in how the school runs or works since the 1900s when kids had to take off summers to go work in farms with their families. We need a whole new vision for public schools, which means end the overuse and abuse of standardized testing in our schools, implement more project-based learning, and bring in the arts and sports and STEM and what am I missing? Music and creativity. So when you look at Bloom's taxonomy, the top of it, the most important skill is creativity. But we're not teaching creativity. We're teaching rote memorization for the most part and how to pass a test. Also, before we even talk about K-12, we got to talk about early childhood. because the brain develops rapidly from prenatal to age 3. And if our babies are going through trauma, the brain doesn't develop properly. So then kids enter kindergarten and they are behind the 8 ball. And they're more likely to end up in special ed, more likely to be suspended, and may end up on the school to prison pipeline. That's why when I was fighting for Build Back Better as part of Biden's full agenda, we were fighting very hard for universal childcare and universal pre-K. That's what we need. Universal childcare, universal pre-K, fully fund our public schools, make public colleges free and 2-year colleges, and then allow people to thrive and be their best selves. Now, some people may say, what's all this free? Why are you talking all this free? We pay taxes, don't we? Stop giving out tax money to fossil fuel companies. Stop giving out tax money to the military-industrial complex. Stop giving out tax money to pharmaceutical companies and health insurance companies and companies that are already billion-dollar companies, tax companies. Give it to the people. And then the people will contribute to the economy, period. And then you see healthcare costs go down because people have less stress, better quality of life. You see jail costs go down because people ain't going to be going to jail. And you see the economy go up. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Did you put up the stop sign? Oh, they did. Oh, okay, sorry. I was looking for it. Yes, I was looking.
Regarding diversity, DEI, what, if any, steps will you take to ensure that diversity, racial equity, and inclusion programs are implemented in the public schools in the district?
I need to get more involved in understanding what's happening in our school districts across CD-16. I visited many schools throughout the district. I've been to Rye High School, Scarsdale High School, Mamaroneck, Mount Vernon. I visit schools all the time. But in terms of what's happening from a DEI perspective in the school board, it's tricky because, I don't have a federal jurisdiction there. I can't tell them what to do. But I would like to learn more about what's happening so that I can lend my expertise to support the implementation of DEI. DEI is also important because I believe our diversity is a strength as a district and as a country, but because of historic segregation and separation and discrimination and racism, we're not accessing that strength. So I just think DEI provides an opportunity for us to have diverse racial, ethnic, LGBTQ, people with disabilities, etc., voices at the table as we implement school curriculum and deal with what's happening in our schools. So that, and I'm the author of the African American History Act in Congress. This is to make sure Black history is accurately taught in our schools. And I'm fighting like hell to stop book bans and book bans, and in Houston we had a library turned into a detention center. We can't have that come to New York, and I know there's some parts of the district and the county where stuff like that is happening. So this is about just pushing back and fighting like hell.
Actually, this is the last question that I have. The Postal Service plays a critical role in our community, providing essential services and union jobs. The question is, if re-elected, what actions will you take to improve the Postal Service and protect these union jobs?
Whatever I can do. My mother worked for the post office, so I'm ride or die with the post office. I'm on the Education and Workforce Committee. I'm also vice chair of labor for the Congressional Progressive Caucus, so I work very directly with unions. As a matter of fact, Sean Fain, new president of the UAW, has some very nice things to say about me today because he heard my opponent doesn't want to raise taxes on the wealthy. So he came out in support of me today, which we appreciate tremendously. UAW has endorsed us, 1199 has endorsed us, DC-37 has endorsed us. Okay, DC-37. NISNA has endorsed us. And so we have so many endorsements from unions, which is phenomenal, including the UAW, like I mentioned. And what we have done is we are on the front lines with unions, on the picket lines, wherever we need to be, so that we can support them working for fair contracts. And we will continue to do that. Organized labor is essential for our democracy to work. And it's essential in terms of making sure people are not underemployed. Everyone should earn a prevailing wage so that they can pay their bills, put a little money on the side, and keep working and contributing to our society while having a good quality of life. And so that's the work that I'm going to continue to do.
One final question was regarding your vote on the infrastructure bill. Is that
Yes.
something that you would like to share before your closing statement?
Sure. So the president had a full agenda. It included the infrastructure vote, and it included Build Back Better. Build Back Better included universal child care, which is in crisis right now, universal pre-K, paid leave for the first time in history, and historic investments in affordable housing, which is in crisis right now. That was the full agenda. Ron Klain, the president's chief of staff, said, and I quote, "Progressives didn't kill Biden's agenda. They were champions of his full agenda." The infrastructure bill passed. My vote didn't kill it. So the fact that they are running ads over and over again about a bill that passed from 3 years ago tells you how strong my record is, and there's nothing else they can say about it. In addition to that vote held the Senate accountable to do something big on climate and lowering prescription drug costs. So we continue to fight. We passed the IRA, which is part of the president's agenda, and now seniors don't have to pay more than $35 a month for insulin, no more than $2,000 a year, and now Medicare for the first time in history can negotiate drug costs. Votes are negotiating tools for bigger and better for our communities that have been left behind. And what is a democracy if we don't have disagreement? Disagreement leads our country in a better place. You think everybody wanted to end slavery with the 13th Amendment? You think everybody wanted to give us voting rights and civil rights? No. This idea that we're supposed to just go along to get along, we've been doing that for how many years, and look at what position we got ourselves in. We need change, and the last thing I'll say is this. 91% of those jobs from that infrastructure bill go to white men. Where is the equity? There ain't none. When you look at the development right now in Yonkers, go drive by the people building those buildings. All the license plates are from out of town. They're not from Yonkers. I will not compromise seniors and children for roads and bridges that only give jobs to white people. I'm not going to compromise that. Why you got me fired up? Thank you.
Dr. Bowman, we thank you so very much. We do want to offer you 2 minutes for your closing statements. If there's anything else that you want to add that we may have not asked or you felt you didn't have an opportunity to elaborate on, we want to give you 2 minutes for your closing statements. But before you do that, I think it's only right that we acknowledge the youth and young adults in this space.
Yeah.
So many young people reporting in the back and excusing us. So I just want to thank each of you young people who are radically engaged and informed. Thank you for being here tonight.
Absolutely. So thank you everyone for sticking around. I know we had some technical difficulties and you expected to be more of a debate, but that didn't happen. But thank you for sticking around and thank you for indulging me in the conversation and listening to my responses. It has been a tremendous honor and privilege to serve this district for the last 3 years. I hope to have your vote and support on June 25th, or early voting is June 15th. Please get out and vote, tell your friends to vote. I am governing from the perspective that I led my school with and that I was born and raised with. I come from the working class, I govern with the working class, I'm unapologetic about equity. If we don't build a nation that works for everyone, we don't have a nation. And so I ask for your support to help us to continue to build the district and the country that makes sure it gives everyone access and opportunity to the American dream. When I opened the school, the goal was to unlock the unlimited potential of my students. Now my goal is to unlock the unlimited potential of this district. And unfortunately, My opponent is partnering with people who are spending more money to defeat me in this race than they have ever spent in their history. Whenever a black man speak up for black and brown people, they spend and do everything in their power to take that black man down. And there's some very specific reasons for that. One, I call for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza because taxpayer money should not be going to bomb children and women and babies. So because I call for a permanent ceasefire, that's one reason why they're coming after me. The other reason is I am unapologetically speaking up for the least lost, left behind, historically neglected, and marginalized. Because if we don't have a democracy that works for everyone, we don't have a democracy. So ask yourself, damn, where they get all this money to go after this brother who had brought $1 billion to the district to invest in our most underserved communities? With his only sin being a vote on a bill 3 years ago that passed.
All right.
I'd like to take this time to introduce Mr. Jeff Light, who is the Criminal Justice Chair for the Greenberg White Plains and Civic Engagement Chair for the Greenberg White Plains and NAACP.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Before I start, I want to thank the TDYCC Center for us tonight, because we originally had a different venue, but we had to change, and they came to us and invited us with open arms. So we thank you. So let's give a round of applause. I am Jeff Wright, and I'm the Civic Engagement Chair for White Plains Greenberg and NAACP. I usually have a pretty loud voice. Is that better? Okay. The NAACP civic engagement encompasses many responsibilities to our communities, but none is more important than protecting your right to vote. We are committed to voter education in order to ensure that you are an informed voter. Our charter is to be nonpartisan, that is, not to be affiliated with or have bias towards any political party. Therefore, the NAACP does not endorse any candidate for office. The fundamental right to vote is under attack, creating a threat to democracy as we know it. Efforts to make it harder to participate in the political process is proliferating all across the country, especially for minorities. And we're funding those efforts. From now throughout the election season, we need your help to turn out as many voters as possible. Sign up to Power the Vote and contact voters within your community and make sure that your voice is heard. Our branch slogan is lift every voice and vote. I would like to thank Dr. Jamal Bowman, I don't usually refer to that way, for being here and accepting our invitation this evening. We wish you the best of luck with your campaign to represent us in Congress. I would like to ask one more time to give him a round of applause for coming here in person and being here with us. I also would like to recognize the branches that made this possible tonight. And I'm going to call the branches off. And if you're in attendance, please stand. White Plains Greenberg branch. Yonkers branch. Mount Vernon branch. Bronx and Bronx Co-op branch. Port Chester Ride branch. and New Rochelle branch. I'm going to ask for all branch members to remain after the program because we're going to take a group picture, okay? In closing, I would like to remind everyone about voting because the NAACP and my charter as civic engagement chair is my job, my charter to inform voters. So I just want to give you a little bit of voting information before I close. Your request, early voting begins on Saturday, June 15th and runs through Sunday, June 23rd. Your request for an absentee or mail-in ballot must be received by the Board of Elections no later than June 15th. To return your ballot by mail, it must be postmarked no later than June 25th. Your absentee ballot can also be delivered to the County Board of Elections no later than the 25th, or dropped off at an early voting poll site or delivered to the polling site on June 25th. There are 25 early voting centers in Westchester County during early voting period. You can vote at any of these locations. Remember, early voting, you can vote at any location. Any location. On June 25th, you have to vote at your polling place that you're assigned to. Very important. The primary election, once again, is going to be held on June 25th, 2024. So with that, I won't keep you anymore tonight. Okay, no problem. Now, so my fault. I am truly honored to always introduce our branch president. She is one of the hardest working people you will ever meet in your life. Ms. Janice Griffith. And to all the presidents, and I don't remember their names, but to all the presidents, just stand up from each chapter, the presidents. Thank you. Thank you. And we have just one more person I like to recognize because he's our hard-working brother in and out in NAACP, Mr. A.J. Woodson. Neil, we owe you a gratitude. You guys don't realize the technical difficulties we had because of the fact that where you had one candidate that would be here versus one that would. Remember, we are doing this in a hybrid situation, so we have the in-person, plus we have the Zoom. So Neil, we thank you for coming in, getting everything straightened out. We did everything working out. Oh, and we have a Facebook streaming as well. Thank you. Okay, guys. With that, I'm going to say goodnight. We'll see you at the polls. Get home safely.